what happens in the body biochemically, physiologically when we start fasting? Because I think for many people, they're going to need that knowledge and that science to convince them that actually, you know what? Maybe I should give this a go.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. What fasting does, it allows your body to do what it was made to do. You see, we eat. Insulin comes in, puts everything into storage, so you build up some fat. And then you're supposed to live. So when you live, you now start utilizing your calories and you start burning the sugar. When that goes out after maybe about 4 hours or 5 hours, then the glycogen stores in your liver and in your muscles start breaking down, start giving you the calories that you really need to burn so you can run, do your day-to-day activities and all that. And when you run out of that by, let's say, about 18 hours or 20 hours, and then the body says, I need to start burning fat now. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why you put on fat in the first place. That's why we have fat. It's a storage. And then you start burning that fat. And therefore, you start burning that fat. So the fat comes out, comes into your liver, gets converted to some ketones perhaps. And now you're making ketones. And the ketones are being utilized for energy. And then you go for your next meal again. So the body was made to do this. It was not made to just pile on all the time. Because that results in increased fat stores, which you'll never break down. So your body was supposed to do this from the design. You're supposed to do this. So the important thing is that when you eat and you're taking calories, your insulin level obviously goes up. Why? Because insulin has to get that sugar out of the bloodstream. Blood sugar must always come down because otherwise you get damage from that high glucose level in your bloodstream. That's why we treat diabetes, right? Because the blood sugar, or the glucose rather, attaches itself to proteins, so you get glycation end products, and therefore these proteins become dysfunctional. So insulin says, I'm going to take the glucose out, put it down into the storage. First place it puts it into is the liver. When the liver stores are full, then it spills over into the pancreas. More calories come in, there's more glucose, then it goes into the muscles. And it stores everything, and from there into the skin. And that's the way it was supposed to be. But now when we continue to do that, we just keep piling it on. We never get a chance to burn it down, and we're supposed to burn it down. So the biochemistry of the body was made for feeding, fasting cycles. And this is the way the bioengineering of our body was, but we became dysfunctional because as food became more available, we just kept piling it on and on and on and on. And that's the problem that we have today. It's exactly what you said, excessive calories too frequently. So our insulin levels stay high all the time. So that's the biggest problem I found as a cardiologist. You're eating all the time, you're stimulating your insulin all the time, insulin stays high, never gets a chance to come down. And because your insulin doesn't come back down again, you're always in a storage mode. Yeah. This high insulin is the problem. We've hormonally changed because we're eating too frequently. We're not designed to eat that frequently. Insulin's supposed to go up, then come back down again. Up and back down. We stay up all the time, so your body develops, in a simple terms, insulin resistance. Now, the next time you eat, you need even more insulin because just like wearing a jacket, you first feel it, then you don't feel it. The body, when it has high levels of insulin all the time, it becomes insensitive to it. And that's what's happening. We are a hormonally modified human being now. We're becoming insulin resistant. And this insulin resistance results in higher and higher insulin levels. And that's the problem I found. And I just want to digress a little bit. And I'll tell you how I came to this. In my practice, what was happening is patients were coming in with heart attacks and hardening of the arteries and angina. And I said, okay, there must be a cause. And I looked for it. And the cholesterol most of the time was okay. Blood pressure was okay. They were not diabetic. And then I see all this hardening of the arteries. And I'm wondering why. So about 12, 15 years ago, I started doing sugar tests on them, and I found that they actually had mild diabetes, what we call glucose intolerance or impaired fasting glucose. So the sugars were just slightly high, but not enough to make them a diabetic. So I said, okay, fine. So I should put these patients on something to sensitize them and make them better. And I put them on metformin, and I got a lot of resistance from a lot of physicians in the community, plus patients, but the outcomes were better. They actually did better. Then I started doing insulin testing in my office. And I started doing this when I read some information from a physician who wrote a book on insulin, and Dr. Kraft. So it's called the Kraft test. So now what we do is we give them sugar water, patients, and we measure the sugar levels going up and back down again, and said, okay, it went up a little bit, not too bad. But I looked at the insulin response, and it was massive in these patients. So I took 100 patients, and I saw that they were making so much insulin. And I said, this is ridiculous. Why are you making so much insulin? Well, they had insulin resistance. And then I linked the fact that it's the high insulin level that's actually causing the hardening of the arteries, because the sugar levels are okay. Of course, what happens is over time, it's taking a gallon of insulin to bring your sugar levels under control. Eventually, even that's not enough.
Yeah.
So then the sugar level goes up. And then they go to the doctor and say, oh, your sugar levels are high, or your hemoglobin A1C level is high. Now you're a diabetic. Well, guess what? It's too late. You already have all the hardening of the arteries. You've done so much damage to your arteries. You probably did it for 15 to 20 years. And that's the discovery. And that's what really motivated me to make these changes in my patients, to say that, look, I got to get that insulin level down. And it is that high insulin level that really motivated me to really do the fasting program. Because I said, okay, how am I going to get insulin levels down? How do I do that? I don't have a drug. So that's what, look, the whole thing comes down to insulin. For me, it was. Now, as things happen, I discovered more and more fun things in this fantastic journey. But the bottom line is, it was the high insulin level that really got me into this, because I found that when I brought the insulin levels down, my coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, just went down. Patients did so much better. And that high insulin level, the only thing I know that really helps to bring that insulin level down, besides metformin and a few other drugs, really is fasting.
Yeah.
Because when you don't eat, guess what? You don't make insulin. That's it. Your insulin levels plummet. And then the next time you eat, you make insulin, but a much less amount, because you're not sensitive. So this fasting, I got into it through this way. Not because I just wanted to make them reduce weight, because I just wanted to reduce blood pressure. It was really the insulin that got me into fasting. Then, of course, I discovered as time went on that, my God, the blood pressures were coming down, and I realized that insulin is a vasoconstrictor. It reduces nitric oxide in your blood vessels, so therefore your blood vessels can't dilate. Now that brings me to hypertension. That I said, oh my God, I was taught, and you were taught, that 95% of hypertension is essential. And this very word essential, there's nothing essential about hypertension. You don't need it. So
should we explain to non-medical listeners what does that term essential mean? When we say essential hypertension, what do we mean by that?
Which means we don't know the cause of it. It's idiopathic. Idiopathic is another word we use, which means we don't really know clearly what the cause is. It's just something that just happens. So this essential hypertension is not really essential. You don't really need it. And I found through my own experiences here that the fasting brought the blood pressures down. And I said, okay, so what's the correlation? It's insulin. I started reading more about insulin. And sure enough, when you give patients an insulin shot, the blood pressure goes up. You take them off insulin, blood pressures come down. Insulin causes nitric oxide depletion in the blood vessels. Nitric oxide, by the way, is a vasodilator. Okay? Nitric oxide is a natural endogenous product that makes your blood vessels dilate. And then when nitric oxide goes down, the vasoconstrict. This is a dynamic state that you're supposed to have. You walk into a cold room, you vasoconstrict. That means your blood vessels go down. When you go into a hot room, you vasodilate. That's a normal response. This nitric oxide is most essential in our body. It is so important for blood vessels that, in fact, there was a Nobel Prize awarded for this nitric oxide, as you know. So for the audience to realize that insulin, when it comes down, your nitric oxide production goes up, and therefore you vasodilate appropriately. Your blood vessels are not imprisoned anymore, and blood pressure started coming down. I said, this is amazing, because for the first time in my life, I felt that the patients were doing something that was actually bringing their blood pressures down. I mean, we always tell patients who have high blood pressure, okay, avoid excess of salt and go do some exercises, and those are fine. because they also can improve nitric oxide production. But this was a very powerful one. When I brought that insulin levels down on these patients through fasting, blood pressures just plummeted, and I had to actually take patients off blood pressure medications. So that's a huge thing that I found with insulin. So fasting seemed to me the best way to really make the patient's blood pressures come down. And I found that the weights came down. And the question is, why did the weight come down? Well, insulin, bottom line for all your listeners, insulin just is a storage molecule. Puts everything in storage. So when the insulin levels come down, the storage padlocks are taken off. So your fat can now be mobilized. Now there's, of course, I can go into all the enzymes that are involved and the hormone-dependent lipase, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is when insulin levels come down, now your fat pads are available for metabolism. And I found that the fats just started coming off the patients. And when I would look at these patients who would do the fasting program, I'd look at them and they look great. It's not like their faces are all, the excess of skin hanging off, or they have skin hanging off their arms. No. Fasting patients seemed to lose weight in a more beautiful way. They were actually losing fat, but they were also losing the right amount of skin as well. Because you see, prior to this, I used to tell patients, okay, you're going to cut your calories to only 850 calories a day. And you're going to have 4 meals a day. Each one is going to be this much. And the patients would come back. Sure, they lost some weight. They would lose a lot, actually, sometimes. But they would look terrible. They would look absolutely terrible. Their faces, their skin, and plus they were miserable because they just they didn't feel good eating small amounts of food frequently. This advice that we gave patients previously, that, hey, cut your calories down by eating 4 small meals a day or nibble throughout the day. Totally wrong in clinical experience. They lost temporary weight. They all would put it back on again. Did it for years. I did it for 15 years and I was sick and tired of it. They would come back miserable saying, Doc, my life's miserable. I only eat this much and I just feel terrible. I'm hungry all the time. And I look at them, they even look miserable. And their skin was just... So when patients were fasting, they would come back and they were laughing. They were so happy. The mood was better. And I said, no, why is this guy's mood so good? He hasn't eaten for 2 days now. And he says, Doc, my mood is better than it ever was before. I'm sleeping better as well.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying this video and want to dive deeper into the topic of sleep, I have created a free special guide containing my top 5 science-backed tips to help you get your best night's sleep and reduce fatigue. If you want to get hold of this free guide, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box below.
And he empowered himself. And I said, no, wait, this is psychological. He's just, he was able to do it, so he's feeling good about himself. He says, no, Doc, I do feel good that I was able to do it. And I'm self-empowered, but also they felt better. And then, of course, as I do the research, I see that there are many substances that are produced during fasting. And one of them is BDNF, which is a big word for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What that really basically means is, look, when you are fasting, does nature want you to just crawl into your cave and fall asleep and just die? No, nature wants you to go out there, find your kill or your prey or your find your berries or something. So it actually makes your brain more alert, and rejuvenates your brain. And you actually, now there's data to show that you can actually grow new cells as well in prolonged fasting. So what happens is that you actually become more wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. And that's what I saw with the patients too. That they were so happy when they walked into my office. You're walking to a cardiologist's office laughing and joking. This is fantastic. So that's something. And then I found that their energy levels, they just not only felt better mentally and their mood was better, but they said that they moved around better. So I said, what does that mean? They said, well, look, my aches and pains went away. I said, come on. I said, yes, I only lost 15 pounds so far, but my joint pains are all gone. Now, wait a second. Why is that? Why did the joint pains go away? You don't take off that much weight to take them off your knee. Well, there's inflammation. And I found that inflammation went down in these patients. So I said, okay, so how do I measure inflammation? So I looked at the CRP levels on these patients. And I found that the CRP is a blood test. And your audience would know that this is a test that we do to look for inflammation, microinflammation in your blood vessels. And I found that they were coming down. Now, you know how hard it was for me to bring these inflammatory markers down? I mean, we give patients statins, and that does bring down CRP. But I found that these patients who were fasting, the CRP levels came down. And perhaps a lot of the inflammation in the joints was getting better because the inflammation went down. So I said, okay, that's fine. What else are you feeling? I said, well, you know what? My stomach feels good too. So, wait a second. Come on, guys. I mean, you're fasting, and how can this be happening to you? I said, yeah, less bloating. My bowel movements are better. I'm not getting so gassy, and I don't get that fatigue after eating. I just feel so down. Of course, they're not eating, but when they do eat after the meal, they feel so much better. So they are eating after when they break the fast, but they're feeling better. Their guts are better. Their joints are better. Their minds are better. I just said, oh God, this is crazy. This is crazy. So that's what really, I got so excited about fasting, as you can tell. It is an amazing journey.
If you enjoyed that short clip, I think you are really going to enjoy the full conversation, which you can check out here.